I was walking into these art spaces and I was walking into these boardrooms and these tables as an executive director and not as an artist. I'm talking about creating opportunities for artists, but I also rule myself out because now that's a conflict of interest. I'm creating these platforms and these opportunities that are massive and huge and are going to put money in the pockets of artists and help impact the way people see themselves, especially those of the African diaspora with this institution. However, I continue to rule myself out, you know? So it got to a point where I'm just like, okay, I love that I'm able to do this, but I felt like I wasn't at a place in my career yet where I could comfortably keep ruling myself out and being in a conflict of interest. Hey everyone, my name is Stephanie Brown. You are tuning in to another episode of the In Between Artists podcast. We're actually wrapping up our first season, and this is episode number 7. Today is a little different. I've got my friend Sierra King here, and she's actually going to interview me. It makes sense after hearing about so many other people's creative stories that I've been able to interview that I wanted to bring in someone that I trust and that I love and a fellow artist friend to have that conversation with me. So thank you, Sierra, for volunteering. For saying yes.
Thank you, yes.
She was like, wait, I volunteered.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie, for asking me, inviting me. I think we talked a bit earlier about how I am always doing these speaking engagements, but not necessarily documenting them.
Yeah.
So a lot of people aren't aware of like actually what I sound like.
Yes. She speaks.
Yeah. So that's a new thing. But before we get into the questions, I guess I can tell a little bit about myself and how I know Stephanie.
Yeah.
I am a curator, archivist, and an artist, and I began working in arts administration about a decade ago now. So,
Aging ourselves.
coming back from college, I was very eager about just like parting my own knowledge and parting what I knew from school and giving that back to others. Yeah. And because I realized like Atlanta at that point around maybe 2015 was really growing as far as like the film, music, culture, arts. Like everyone was looking to Atlanta to see what was happening next and who were the artists there and who were on the ground really like going after their careers, whether it be going after their careers in a way that either younger artists were getting their feet wet or the older artists were like pivoting and changing and adapting to the ecosystem that was happening around them. So I had just like jumped feet first into all of that. And if you listen to anything else I have online, I like to joke about that like I didn't necessarily want to get into photography as a business, but I always wanted to like be in the experience and be a part of like productions and crews and things like that. And so I was always looking for a concert to go shoot or always to like be behind the scenes of a film. And so that kind of like navigated my way to help me learn other artists. And so around 2019, when I came across your work, I was also looking for like a lot of Black women photographers that were looking to like build bodies of work.
Yeah.
And by building bodies of work, like not necessarily going after like shoot for shoot, but just really like trying to understand how they wanted their careers and their pathways to like navigate them holistically.
And cultivating a practice, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I had the opportunity to go to Basel with you, and some other things, and then it feels like eons since then.
Yes.
And even now, just the 5-year gap from 2020 to 2025, so much has happened.
Yeah.
So knowing that time frame and those things you've been involved in, I want you to put yourself back into like little Stephanie and kind of sit with her and have a conversation with her and say, okay, we're at 2025, but like, is this what you envisioned for your life at this point?
I think little Stephanie would be proud. I have always been a chronic planner. Like I was leaving the 5th grade saying, yeah, I'm going to go to this middle school and this high school. Like I had all that planned out and they're just like, okay. And I feel like I've had a lot of full circle moments since then. But I think little Stephanie would be proud. Nothing is at the time frame that I imagined it. And I think after graduating from college, I needed to learn that hard lesson of like letting go of timelines and instead just starting to move into like what feels good and what feels right, and going that way. So that's been a big part, I feel like, of the lessons that I've learned. But I am actively an exhibiting artist. I am actively doing what I love. I am actively centering my joy and like living a creative life. And those are all the things that little Stephanie wanted. And traveling is still happening. Yeah.
And to speak to that, like growing a practice, I think thinking about how your bodies of work informed, I guess, the different phases of your practice. So like how did like planning the research and things that like you're interested in and like your through lines and your obsessions and things lead to like the evolution of like your practice?
Oof. Yeah, that's a loaded question. Like just very casually. So it's like, yeah, that's, I think for starters, I don't feel like I had a formal art practice until graduate school. Looking back at it now, I think that my time in undergrad was really honing myself as a photographer. I think my time at SCAD, Savannah, because I live in Atlanta now and I have to always say that, and I didn't think it was a thing, but it's a thing. Yeah, my time at SCAD Savannah was important for like really honing who I was as a photographer, and getting used to working on a single project over an extended period of time, opposed to going shoot to shoot to shoot to shoot. And I feel like a lot of photographers can relate that when you get that new camera or when you're just starting out, you're just photographing whatever flies by, and it's just one after the next after the next. And in high school, I started to have some of those longer term projects, and I was an IB student, so a lot of those things happened. But college is really where it was like, okay, cool. So you're going to do this project that you come up with. It's your original ideas, and we're going to critique along the way. And you're going to go back and shoot some more and refine and edit. And that's where I started to realize, okay, this is what an iterative process looks like in art making. So I started to get a flow around my photography. And I feel like undergrad is where I built my confidence, my skill set. I also learned what I didn't want to do, which is just as important as learning what you do want to do. So I did do a lot of internships. I tried to surround myself a lot of different like photo related industries. And I figured out a lot of things that I did not want to do, like shooting for a magazine, which I thought I might want to, or even like shooting for a studio or like a specific brand as I thought I might want to. Having some of those opportunities, I was just like, no, this isn't it. But for me, going to graduate school, and I had about a 2-year break from leaving SCAD to going to University of Michigan for my master's. So I had a 2-year break. And in that time period is when I made that decision to like go to graduate school. But graduate school is where I credit that opportunity of like, I took my iterative process and now I was thinking more expansively, like beyond my medium of photography. And I was thinking more conceptually, more research-based. Literally taking ideas and thinking about how do I bring them about? Why do I want to bring them about? What impact am I looking to to bring or introduce to the world? What questions am I posing? And what medium, what methodology is going to actually like bring that to life in the best way or in the most interesting way? That was also my first time having a studio. So having a space to just like throw my crazy sketches on the wall, or starting to introduce my writing, which was something that I always put separate from my art, where it's just like, I've always been a writer, but I didn't actually identify writing as a part of my creative process until graduate school. So I do credit that time for giving me the language of who I am as an artist today, and really building the foundation of those through lines that are still present in my practice now.
Yeah, and can you speak a bit to how that cultivation, as far as like understanding the different like fractals of your practice, and how that translated into the commission-based work?
Yeah, when you say commission-based work, you mean like installation-wise or photo-wise?
Photo-wise first.
Okay. So much of my work has been rooted in wanting to understand how people construct their identities, specifically how Black people construct their identities. The more I traveled, the more I learned, the more research I did, I was inspired to share what I was learning about. So like the more I learned, the more I was just like, oh my goodness, the world needs to know this kind of thing. So how can I bring this forward? So the work that I was doing was really pieces of a larger puzzle of the same questions that I was asking myself, the same questions that I'm exploring, trying to figure out how can I explore those things through different mediums and through different conversations or through different projects that are happening. So over the years, what I realized is that my photography in particular, my Black and white nude photography, were these intimate exchanges and experiences. I wasn't just having someone sit for me for, to take a picture just because. I was always very intentional in my model selection. I was always very intentional about the environment that I was creating for them. It wasn't until now that I really understand like the performance aspect within it, and the world is just seeing the photograph afterwards. But once I realized there's this whole experience around it and the impact that my work was having on just the model alone, or the person who was sitting for me, because they're not always models, just when I heard from them personally, the memories, the joy, the own like questioning of themselves in a positive way, and growth that they had experienced just from modeling for me, I was like, whoa, okay, what does this look like in a commission sense? And how can I build a commission practice and opportunity around my photography? We see painters do it, we see sculptors do it. I'm just like, why can't photographers do it? And oftentimes, because we're so used to, I identify as a fine art photographer, right? So what's the difference between doing a commission with you versus just going and have a portrait session with, any other photographer? And it's that intentionality. It's the experience behind it. It's also the output. Commissions are not for digital files. They're for fine art works that are going to live with you. I see my photo commissions as opportunities to really co-create with the person that I'm photographing. It's like, obviously you're attracted to my style, you're attracted to my work. So now this is an opportunity for us to dive deeper and to actually create something together. And in the end, I gain a collector and you gain a piece of art that you have an even more intimate experience with. And beyond that, hopefully you are leaving with a better understanding of yourself through my lens.
Yeah. And I think when you had like first explained that to me, like that kind of like light bulb moment when it went off in your head, you were like, oh, this just makes like sense to pivot into. How well received was it from
Rough.
the
Rough. I feel like it still has a lot of growth to happen. It's difficult, I think, for people to validate how much money they want to spend on photography because of the relationship we have with photography. I think it's the blessing and the curse of like Instagram and social media. The weight that we put on photography is just different. And even though photography is considered, a fine art form, it wasn't in the beginning. And we still see the reverberations of that impact and that delay of photography even being considered a formal art form in our industry today. The respect that's given to a painting or a sculpture, or people putting more value on, like, well, how long did it take you to make that thing? And even as photographers, like, a lot of photo-based items oftentimes might sell more, or be more intrigued. People might be more intrigued by it. There's a little something out there for everybody, but they are challenges that I think I'm navigating, and I'm just learning to navigate. And the best thing I can do, I feel like, is just continue to stay true to like what I do, and continue to have opportunities like this, to showcase and explain the work, because it's going to hit the right person, and that person will find me, and I'll be happy to work with them.
Yeah. And so I think what I recognized initially after that was like, okay, you understood it wasn't necessarily working for that time period, but how could you still like involve yourself in the process of the body of the work?
Yeah.
And so that kind of like pushed you into thinking about different ways of presenting it and get in the gallery spaces. So can you speak a bit about that process, like from it being just matted and framed to the sequence kind of like interactive version that you have now?
Yeah. So the work definitely it transformed from me thinking about, okay, it's a photograph, it's going to be printed and framed and put on a wall. As I got more into installation art and interactive art in particular, I started thinking about, well, what's the best way to showcase this particular work depending on its outcome, or the ideas or the themes around the work. So that went into me. I've done work on metal prints. I've almost exclusively print on like archival matte paper. That's my personal preference for just my style of shooting and the way that the work looks. Most recently, the sequence work is definitely thematically driven. For years now, like over 10 years, all of my black and white nude work, I have intentionally omitted the gaze. You don't see people's faces. There's nothing identifiable about the bodies that I'm photographing. And that was all for specific reasons of wanting to focus on the form, focus on the light, the geometry and the compositions that I'm making within the bodies. But with the sequence work, I had an opportunity when I had that light bulb moment of what would it look like to utilize the gaze in this way, because now it's necessary. The sequence body of work is specifically highlighting the simultaneous visibility and invisibility of Black women. And I had just coincidentally been on like a Black woman photo kick. So those were all the people that I was photographing. And even though I wasn't utilizing the images of the gaze, I almost always still had a few. But now I was kind of going back into the studio more intentionally, capturing that gaze, capturing that audacity, that boldness, those direct stares, looking to take those moments from the studio and bring it into the gallery space, but to allow people to explore and like discover it with their hands. And how can the interaction with their hands alone become conversations around consent, and actually identify an acknowledgement, because regardless, the Black woman is there, just like the Black woman has always been present, especially in the creation and the foundation of this country in America. And that is its underlying metaphor of we're here, regardless. So whether you want to give us our flowers or not, we're here, we're present. Whether you see us or not, we're here, we're present. And to watch people discover the figure beneath the sequence is my favorite part. It's a wow factor, of course, which is fun, but it's also impactful. Like, you see it in people's body language of like, oh, okay. And even some people not wanting to engage because of like the respect of almost like, oh, okay, I understand that I can touch it, but I'm going to choose not to. And even that alone, I feel like it's just another layer of like, okay, this is great.
And I think to that point, and just hearing you talk about the work in that way, it really just expands the body of work itself, because it just gives it more power to how much you're invested in the research and invested in the initial process of understanding the conversation that you're having.
Yeah.
And so much so that the work almost becomes like the final product of like just exploring the materiality and just exploring the medium of the conversation. And thinking about that and thinking about different incubators that you've done that in, and this is kind of like a fireball question of like, what has been like your favorite fellowship or residency that you've been able to think about those ideas in? And I'm gonna speak a bit about just, I guess I am an advocate of like, you shouldn't exhibition until like you've done like a few fellowships and
We have that in
residencies.
common.
Because that time and space and just interaction between either your audience or mentors or being able to explore different and experiment different materials and things is almost kind of like a mini critique between yourself and your practice. That doesn't necessarily get to happen in the exhibition space. So again, the question, what has been like your favorite fellowship or residency that has allowed you or pushed you into a different part of like your practice?
So there's kind of two that come to mind immediately. So one is I did the Hambidge residency, and I did that shortly after I buried my dad, actually. And I think the timing of that was really good for me. For those who aren't familiar, like Hambidge puts you in the middle of nowhere in the North Georgia mountains. And that isolation is great. I think the point in time in which I did Hambidge as well, I mean, beyond the passing of my dad, but like the time that I went to Hambidge, had already been in Atlanta for quite some time. This is years after graduate school. So I've got some experiences under my belt where I feel like it was a good pressure cooker kind of incubator for me to rely on myself, because you are isolated and because you are, relying on yourself in that way. I feel like those things were necessary and helpful, but it really put me in my writer bag again. And it also helped me realize what I need to write and what environment I need to write. It was also a reminder of how creative I can be so quickly when I turn off all of the noise. And it's hard. It's easier said than done, because it's like bills are still calling, jobs are still calling. It is very difficult to like carry all of those things all at once. And I was carrying a lot. I wasn't just pausing from one job to go to Hambidge. I was pausing from my work with the museum at the time. I was pausing from my day job. I was pausing from my own, art career, which is a job. I was pausing from a joint business that I have with my husband. I was pausing from being my mother's support person. Like I was pausing from all of those roles to go sit in a cabin and think about art. And it didn't take me long where like the floodgates just like open. I still have things that I wrote about and ideated about that I haven't even, like I still want to go back and explore. So yeah, I think that was a really big deal for me. Honestly, it's like almost more than the fellowships and the residencies. It's just the time away. Like my time away, I always credit for. That's when I figured out I wanted to go to graduate school. I was at sea working as a photographer on a cruise ship. I had tons of downtime. and lots of solitude, and also a lot of new life experiences. And that's something that I've always bonded with you about, is like, we have a lot of respect and honor for methodology and for process and the power of critique. And it wasn't until like experiencing the art world as an adult and meeting other people who don't have that as they don't actually have a practice, you know. They might be hella talented, but they don't necessarily have a formal practice, or they're still figuring out what that looks like. Immediately I was seeing like, oh, okay, it's very easy to get swept up into the, okay, this application's for this, let me make something for this, cool. Oh, this is called for this, so I'm gonna make something for this, you know, and then I'm gonna sell it, and then like, you're just moving on to the next, but you're not really creating a body of work. And then the work misses out on an opportunity of like getting deeper. So I am very fortunate for my time away to be opportunities for me to just question the world. All of the things that I explore in my art are things that I have realized during my travels. There are things that, yes, are informed by what I learned in school, but even going to school to learn about those things was informed because of my travels. So it's all life experiences, you know. I'm traveling and I'm just like, where the hell are the Black people? You know, and oh my goodness, there we are, thriving. Would have never thought that in this country or in this part of the world. And next thing you know, like, my realization of us being a global majority is what that solidified it for me. That was my, okay, it's time to go to graduate school. It's time to like dive deeper into this thing, because now I know what I want to say as an artist and how I want to present myself to the world and what I want to root my practice in. That's actually bringing me joy. Like, it's a part of my why for creating, my why for being an artist. And with that truth, like in my hand, I feel like I can do no wrong. I mean, I'm human. It sucks when you get, you know, rejections or no's or people not seeing your stuff, but it's also clearing the path for where I am supposed to show up and where I am supposed to be. And those have been really valuable lessons for me in my career.
Shout out to Cambridge.
Yes.
If this is like an ad plug.
Right. Yes. I love it.
Definitely, like, if you're...
And we stayed at the same cabin, I'm just remembering, too.
Which one? The writer's cabin?
Yeah, so in each of the cabins have guest books where people can sign. And I was getting ready to sign. I was just looking through. I wasn't even ready to sign it yet because I had just started. And I saw Sierra King. And I was like, look at God. Put me in the same cabin Sierra was in.
Hambridge is great. Like, I'm like their number one stan. And if you look at my resume,
You've been a lot.
It reflects that. They've definitely been a supporter of my practice and given that time away, or given studio space, which is like far and few between in Atlanta. I guess I kind of want to pivot into knowing, like, coming out of isolation and then starting to make like different connections based on like this body of work that you have. What has that been like, as far as like understanding that you have this specific body and you have this why that you're looking towards? What has nurturing the type of relationships that will be best for that body of work looked like for you?
A work in progress. I think I'm still figuring out like what my lanes are. I used to say I'm trying to figure out what my lane is, but I'm now realizing that it's varied. Just as varied as my work is becoming, so are the different avenues in which like the work can perform well. I use a lot of satire in my work. I would also say that I'm very bold in my themes and a lot of the imagery that I utilize, and that can be limiting in terms of where I show up. For example, you know, just did a corporate show and they loved my nude work, but of course their higher ups were just like, and no. So then it's just like, okay, well, let's figure something else. Documentary work, that's safe, you know, that's not really what the curator wanted, but It's like I'm used to that.
Yeah.
And it's also a part of just living in the South, you know? So Atlanta is a bubble where we can get away with a lot of things. But at the end of the day, I do have to be mindful that I'm living in the South. I chose to live in the South. And I'm reminded of that often when I do have opportunities to show outside of Georgia as a whole. And the way my work is received, it goes from, I don't know, I mean, never shy of compliments, right? Like people love the work, they see that it's beautiful, but it's very different to say like, oh, this work is beautiful and oh, I want to collect it. Oh, this work is beautiful and oh, I want to engage with it. I want to see it exist in other places. I want to go to bat for it, you know? All of those things are very different. And I have found the support that I have found here in Atlanta are often people who are not from the South. They might have also found themselves living here, but they're all coming from different experiences, whether it's New York, LA, or overseas. They just have a broader, I think, perspective of thinking about the different ways that work can show up. I've started looking more at organizations. I think a happy accident was actually recently like in an independent school. So my largest installation, Seesaw, was at Science Gallery in 2023. And the director of DEI saw it, loved it, brought his students there that same week, brought more students there the next week, and then engaged with Floyd Hall, who was the director at the time. And he's like, hey, can you connect me to the artist? Because I'd love to bring this to our school. And I'd never thought about that. I didn't think about, you know, of course, maybe at the university level, like through University Gallery, but I didn't grow up going to these types of schools. I didn't even fathom that as a thing, you know, but these private schools have different budgets, and they have different learning styles, and they have the space to like cultivate an artist residency. And which is what they did. They had an artist residency where they were inviting artists to show work and work with students. And that I realized became or was growing to be like a really strong lane for me because my work is meant to exist in community. There's work that I make, sure, that can just kind of exist on its own, but the driving factor of my why is driving that impact, helping people navigate their own identities in the same way I'm navigating mine. And being in conversation with people about not just the impact of my work, but their actual lived experiences, because that informs the next body of work or the next project that I want to, you know, dive into. So being on that campus, K through 12, was such a great incubator of having my work there and being able to engage with voices as young as third grade. I got to chat with some third, fourth graders, all the way up to, you know, seniors, and hearing the common threads, their experiences, what life is like, you know, for those generations right now, but seeing them all relate to my work through their own different ways. All of that was affirming. And that led me to then showed my work at Westminster. So it went from Paideia School, and then I did a residency in an exhibition at Westminster School. And again, another similar situation, independent schools with just more access and space, but allowing me to like really engage with students in a different way. And I'm just like, yeah, this is where it's at. I feel like to be able to do more of that, but now in community, like what does that look like outside of institutional walls is where I've been looking to like pivot and move towards. Again, it's kind of navigating and finding who's willing to have those hard conversations because the stakeholders matter. You know, not all cities are going to be keen to that. If it's even, you know, none of the work is religious per se, but there might be a religious icon or symbol and, oh, sorry, we can't touch that. Or even the slightest suggestion of nudity, even there if there is none, still, oh, can't touch that. So knowing those limitations are just something that they've not held me back. They've just actually caused me to think outside of the box in terms of how I show up and where I can show up when really looking to put my work out in the world.
In this, like, even hearing that, it's like you're almost like realizing as you like walk, like, okay, yes, I can go into these co-curated communities that are already existing, but it's almost like pushing you into um, creating a community for yourself.
Yeah.
And can you speak a bit about how you're doing that, or how how you've done that before, and how that's changed since you have a son now?
Yeah. It's changed a lot. I think what I was doing before is I lived in college towns. So it's very easy, I think, to build community when you're in a college town or when you're an active student. I think any adult can attest to who's adulting, like making friends as adults is hard. Different people have different priorities. A part of what attracted my husband and I to even staying in Atlanta was community. When we moved here, I was like, all right, we'll give it 3 years and we'll just see how we feel. And the art community is really what allowed us to stay, what made us say like, you know what, actually, I think we want to buy a home. I think we want to settle here. I think we want to like really have roots here. The community I was able to build through TILA, through even my studio space that I have in Avondale Estates, Little Tree Art Studios. They're the only art studio on the east side of Atlanta. So we're a very tiny community. And there's still people in there that I haven't necessarily met them all. But knowing who I can call on, I think has been helpful. I've always cultivated community through the different roles that I've played. So definitely an extrovert for the most part. I really take advantage of every work opportunity or networking opportunity to not even necessarily make friends, but just be in conversation with people to see, okay, who do I have in common? Okay, I got something in common over here, or maybe I really want to meet that person. So I'm looking to see, who I can meet there. I've always been interested in surrounding myself with more sound sage voices. So that combination, I think some people thrive with, I don't want to call it trauma bonding, but like being amongst people who are all kind of going through the same thing. And I have found for me that the ideal community is a really healthy mix. So I've got, who we would call like my contemporaries, other people in a similar stage in their art career. I also like having a few people who inspired this podcast, who like I call like the in-between, right? So if I was an in-between artist for someone who is 10 to 15 steps like behind me, but on their way as well. So I have found that being in community with those people is inspiring me because it helps hold me accountable. Because I'm definitely one that I'm going to practice what I preach. So I've never been interested in like teaching at like in a school setting, but I love to teach, right? And I teach through my art and through the work that I make. So for me, being an active mentor has always been important to me because I wanted an active mentor. I wanted a mentor that like would be in the weeds with me. But oftentimes when that mentor is too far ahead of you, they don't necessarily have the time or they can't even relate to where you were. And that's where that separation. So having those people kind of like behind me at the same stage and then in advance of me has been a really healthy mix. It helps me push where I need to push. It helps me chill out when I need to chill out. And they also serve as like shining examples. So for me here in Atlanta, when I started as a volunteer for ADAMA, the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta, that was like my, more mature, deep in either in the art world or in the nonprofit sector or these other tangential art spaces that they've been here, done this, really able to like look up to them and engage with them around like where I am as an artist and in my own career and like where I'm going. And that was always like really affirming. I think what's been difficult for me is that from what I've been taught in school to what I've actually seen work is you got to go be social. You got to show up to the exhibition openings. traditionally, and I would tell this to even whoever I was like mentoring, if you want to show in that gallery, go to their shows, go to their openings, go to the artist talks. Even if you're not pitching yourself, just become a familiar face in the space, introduce yourself to the curators, to the gallery owner, da, 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 da. The reality for me was it was very difficult for me to do that with all of the hats I was wearing and all of the jobs I was always doing simultaneously. And then the deeper I got into the work with the museum, as lovely as that was with my executive director hat on, I was walking into these art spaces and I was walking into these boardrooms and these tables as an executive director and not as an artist. I'm talking about creating opportunities for artists, but I also rule myself out because now that's a conflict of interest. I'm creating these platforms and these opportunities that are massive and huge and are going to put money in the pockets of artists and help impact the way people see themselves, especially those of the African diaspora with this institution. However, I continue to rule myself out, So it got to a point where I'm just like, okay, I love that I'm able to do this, but I felt like I wasn't at a place in my career yet where I could comfortably keep ruling myself out and being in a conflict of interest. That would be a role for when I am established, where I've reached a point in my career where it's like, yeah, let everybody else have it. Like, no, I still need to eat. Like, there's still so much growth that I want to make in my art career. So now fast forward to, just literally 3 months after I ended my time with ADAMA as executive director, I had my son. So even though I didn't have all of these jobs and all these different hats, now I had the added factor of I'm on his schedule, period. That's just the reality of having a baby. So I had to pivot in terms of how do I pursue different aspects and opportunities in my career when I can't show up to the artist talk that's at his bedtime. I can't show up to, the exhibition opening that's also at his bedtime or, at dinner time or whatever. I can't show up to all these things and all these spaces because I would have to have him in tow or maybe it's a nap time, all of these things. But of course, I have to figure out a way to make it through. So now I am actively been navigating other opportunities that have been working. That looks like me cold calling. I am doing lots of cold calls, lots of cold emails. I try to make them warm where possible. If I know someone who knows someone, that's always a way. I'm reaching out to my own network and I'm just like, hey, this is what I need. I've always, even though it's been on and off, I've always had a newsletter of some sort. And in my newsletters, I've always been transparent about, hey, this is what I need right now in my practice. These things would be helpful. And people reply to me with opportunities or contact information for someone, and then I'll go reach out to that person. As of late, I'm really seeking more solo shows. I've done a lot of group shows. But at this point in my career, I'm wanting more solo shows or more like intimate shows, like 2-3 person shows that are really going to dive into the practice of the work, the why, the different themes and that kind of thing. So I'm pitching, I'm going to galleries that I like and admire, and no, maybe I didn't get to go see that show in person, or no, maybe I didn't get to go to that opening, but guess what? They documented it like crazy online. I still got to, maybe listen back to that artist talk. I got to look at that work online and see like, okay, this gallery shows this type of work, so my work might make sense here. And where I can, I'm being intentional, showing up at fairs and that kind of thing so that I'm getting some type of face time. So where I'm able to, I still try to show up. But the reality is a lot of my outreach is from a computer desk now. And trying to position myself for people to do virtual studio visits with me or come to me in my studio where I know I can bring my baby, and we can have a conversation. So it just looks different. And my hope is that in a few months from now, I'll have some case studies of like, hey, look, it works. Like there's another model that's possible. If you can't show up in person and do all of those things, how else can we still move our careers forward?
Yeah. I think early on, like, a lot of people or Black women artists that I was coming in contact with were like trying to do both and like trying to like expand themselves, like that they weren't struggling with like the motherhood part, but and not trying to like meld both of them. Um, and I was trying to explain like there is a version of this that like you can put your motherhood first and you can like show up as a mother, but you don't necessarily have to be out in like this crazy thing that's happening. One thing we did talk about, and I guess we can end here, is like since you are transitioning into that, like how are you seeing um, since now coming like out of installation, how are you seeing your work or your practice as a canvas for different opportunities, such as a gallery or a studio or a city? Like, how are you translating those different languages across your practice and helping educating people to understanding like the difference?
Yeah. I'll touch on kind of the end part of that first. So sometimes I mentor people. Sometimes I actually consult for people, and that might look like consulting around their own creative career. So it's like the conversations I have on my podcast started breeding other conversations where people were just like, can you look at this thing? And like they really want me to spend some time with them. And I'm like, there's a fee for that, you know? Because my time is money too. And that's been a really great avenue for me to dabble into. And again, like it helps hold me accountable. But it's become like just another piece of my practice. I think where I've arrived at now, going from a BFA in photography to getting my MFA in interdisciplinary art, to also getting my certificate in museum studies, and wrapping all of those things around all the different experiences that I've had, I've realized that at the end of the day, I was originally separating myself as a exhibiting artist versus like my day job, which was business operations or project management. Like I had always separated those things. And now I've arrived to the place where they're all together in one. And I'm realizing how I was always doing all of those things. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always had my own business. And the same things that I was excelling at in my art career is what was helping me excel in my day jobs as a business operations manager, as a strategic thinker, as a visionary, as a strategic planner. All of those things, even like dealing with budgets, like all of those things, like they continue to feed each other. So the best thing I think that I did, the best decision I made for myself as an artist, choosing to actively be an exhibiting artist and still, have like a traditional career path at the same time, is that I always made sure, I got to a point where I always made sure the day job was complementary to the art practice. I was always intentional about that. And now I'm at a point like 2025 where for the first time, I am all eggs in the art basket. There is no more day job. And as terrifying as that is, it's also really exciting because I don't think it would have worked if I didn't arrive to this point. So all of those experiences, all of the hats that I've worn over the years informed my practice, or informed me to see my practice for as expansive as it really is. I show up as an artist in my podcast, as a host, as a public speaker, as a workshop facilitator, in galleries, showcasing my work at fairs. I've had opportunities, thanks to my executive director hat, to work with cities and other nonprofit organizations and counties. And now I'm identifying the needs that a lot of these municipalities have in regards to the arts and placemaking and creative placemaking. And now my methodology, my art practice, has proven quite a few times now to be instrumental in helping municipalities solve some of their placemaking problems, or they've got budgets to do creative things in their community and they have no idea where to start. And none of them, for the most part, have ever thought to hire an artist. And it's also rare that an artist has both of those capabilities to work kind of on both of those sides of the fence. And I'm realizing that, oh, that's another superpower that I can implement. And how can I look at all of these things as revenue sources? How can I now, this is my thing I'm figuring out now, is how to cultivate and foster all of these avenues. And even though it sounds like a lot, I am at peace because they're all cohesive. Where before my practice and my day job and every opportunity felt fragmented. I feel like I was bouncing between all these different hats. And for the first time, I've arrived to a place in my career where I'm wearing one creative hat and I'm giving myself the permission and I have the clarity and the language to describe how I show up in these different ways that might seem fragmented to someone else. But when you look at the work that I'm doing, it's all the same. It's just a different environment, whether it's on campus of an independent school or in downtown of my city or in Midtown Atlanta, or at a residency or at a fellowship, or in a gallery, group show or solo show. I'm activating the same parts of my brain. I'm utilizing my same methodologies of research-based work, impact-driven work, community-based work, work rooted in looking at how we construct our identities and providing opportunities of engagement that will then further the next project and the next thing. And I like it here. I like it here. My journey right now is just figuring out how to afford staying here. But mentally and emotionally, I like it here. And I wouldn't change a thing of all the things within my creative career so far. Yeah, I'm proud of myself. I think little Stephanie will be super proud. We've arrived, you know? And I think now, especially with my son, I've got more non-negotiables. I feel like being a mom has just made me bolder and more audacious, really. In other areas where I might have caved or been nervous to like speak up for what I want, I'm like, nope, this is it. This is what it needs to be. Like, wow, that sounds like a really great project, but this is what's going to be required because I don't know how to half-ass anything. That's just not possible for Stephanie Brown. So, you know, whatever the budget is, we can work within it, but I come with my full self. I come with all of these things. I bring that to the table in every situation. And yeah, so I'm proud of me for being able to like honor that now and hone in on that.
Yeah, I'm proud of you too, Stephanie.
Thanks.
And I hope that like whatever happens after this, we continue to be on our own parallel paths and be able to work together, collaborate together, and keep figuring it out.
I'm here for the mutual glow up. That's my favorite thing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for co-hosting and interviewing. Yeah, I'm really excited about this episode and our future collaborations and yeah, for what this brings. So thank you all for tuning in. This has been another episode of the In Between Artists podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.